And now, this afternoon or evening's featured guest is Alora Berry, class of 2011. Often assigned the role of appetizers for family parties growing up, Alora earned, it says earned, but I'm sure it's learned to experiment with different cheese and meat pairings to create beautiful boards of all types. The ability to bring friends and family together and give them the opportunity to try new flavors and ingredients is what fueled her passion and founding of Berry and the Boards, a custom cheese, charcuterie, crudité, and fruits board purveyor. Curating only the best ingredients, as we'll see, Alora has created boards for brands such as L'Oreal, Moroccan Oil, WB Mason, Charlotte Tilbury, and more. Along with her passion to create beautiful food, she enjoys teaching others and sharing tips and tricks so we can all create the perfect cheese board at home, which is our plan for this evening. And if you haven't seen her Instagram, you will need to do so. Bethany will put it in the chat, but it's Berry and the Boards, and you will just be drooling every time you see the beautiful creations that Alora makes. So please join me in virtually welcoming Alora. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to take you guys through my process of building a board so that you can create a board at home. These are tips and tricks that I use, so please feel free to leverage them when you are able to host a party in the future or have friends over or anything in particular. So hopefully you have your ingredients.
Alora, can I just do the poll really quickly for if people, I'll launch that right now.
Yeah, we'd love to know if you guys are making a board at home with us. So we can see your board after. Hopefully you are. Yes, I have my supplies ready. Submit. While we're doing the survey, if you guys want to start on taking out your cheese from the packaging, that would be a great start. That is what I like to start with. And also, if you want to grab a small cutting board or a small dinner plate or a large dinner plate or a large cutting board, whatever you have at home. I am using this small dinner plate because I just myself actually tonight. So whatever you guys choose, I like to pick my boards based on the size and the amount of people that I'm going to be serving. So this is a little bit bigger than just one for myself. Actually, it's not, because I would totally eat the whole thing by myself, but I like to gauge it that way. And I am a big fan of large cutting boards as my vehicle to build my board. So this is the starting point of building your creation. You'll start with your plate or your cutting board or just whatever board you have. And the first thing we're going to do is lay the foundation of our board with our cheese. So I have a few different types of cheeses that I'm going to take you guys through of how I prepare them and how I cut them. But I like to make sure when I build a board, I have a diverse kind of flavor palettes of different types of cheeses and types of cheeses, kind of alternating between a hard cheese, a soft cheese, or a semi-soft cheese. And then also alternating as well between the types of cheese in terms of the animal that it comes from. So a cow's cheese, a sheep, or a goat. I like to try to make sure I have a mix of all those things when I'm building a board if it's for a group of people. But hopefully you guys have picked cheeses that are your favorites, since you are the one that will be enjoying the board after. And please feel free to pick and eat at your board as you go. I think it's almost impossible not to pop a piece of cheese in your mouth while you're building. So feel free to do that too. But to start, I have this St. Andre triple cream brie. It's actually sold at Trader Joe's for a very affordable price. I will say, if you're looking to build a board and not break the bank, Trader Joe's is the absolute best place to do so. Their unexpected cheddar is amazing and so good, and unexpectedly delicious, as you'll see, and also very cheap, not cheap, affordable. And there are just so many different cheeses that are so great there. I highly suggest just going and looking at what type of cheese you like, and then usually finding it. So they usually have a blue, they usually have a Gouda, they have a brie. All of their cheeses are absolutely amazing. If you want ones in particular, feel free to message me and I would be happy to send you the list that I go to. And someone just added to the chat that Aldi has really great affordable cheese too, and that is absolutely correct. Really great cheese pretty much anywhere, but if you're looking to splurge, Whole Foods is a really great place, and Murray's Cheese Shop is wonderful, and you can order online from Murray's. That's actually where I get a lot of my cheeses. But to kind of take you guys through a few different ways to cut your cheese. So this triple cane brie, I usually leave it on its own, but I serve it with a cheese knife so people have the ability to kind of scoop it as they go. But when you have a block of cheese like this, I think it's almost impossible and people don't know what to do if there's just a block of cheese on your plate. So I like to cut this and prepare it so it's easy for people to grab. This is a manchego, which is a sheep's cheese. And the coating is usually wax. So I would definitely not eat that. So you'll start up by cutting off one side. But I like to leave the back of the manchego on because I like the texture that it adds to the boards. And I think it adds a little bit of a different color. So I'm just going to cut a couple slices this way and show you guys just like this amount of this thickness, not super thick. Cut a few of those, and I'm going to show you guys a few different ways to arrange this type of cheese. And you can do this with any sort of triangle cheese, any like cheese that's already prepared like this, or you could, of course, like this block of cheese, you could cut it into slices and then cut triangle this way on it too, if you don't have a triangle cheese. So you could just slice it into slices this way and then cut it this way, just as a tip. And I also like to try to cut the different cheeses in different ways so that people know that there are different types of cheeses. So it can differentiate the different cheeses that are on the board. If you have a manchego and then you have a cheddar and you cut it the exact same way, you might know the difference, but someone that just doesn't know and might not like a manchego just might grab it on accident. So I'm just going to cut a couple more of these and show you what I like to do with them. And I'll show you my favorite way to arrange the triangle cheeses like this. If you have not tried Cypress Grove Midnight Moon, it's a goat cheese, but it's a hard goat cheese and it's shaped like this usually too. One of my most favorite cheeses, anything by Cypress Grove is usually pretty wonderful. And I feel like most people have heard of Humboldt Fog. That's one of their kind of like signature cheeses, but their hard goat cheese is incredible too. And one of my favorite things to put on boards. And if you look at almost any of my boards, you'll see a cheese fanned out and it's usually that cheese. So you have these triangles, which are great. You can lay them like this if you'd like, and just start to arrange them this way so that this is one way that's pretty easy, and stack them on top of each other. You could of course flip it and do that same sort of layout that way. Or you could start to use these cheeses and alternate kind of the triangle here and build out this like zipper look. So I'll pick it up and bring it closer to the camera once I lay these out, but just alternating every other cheese direction. And then you get this little like zigzag look that you can have. And I think this makes it really easy for people to grab the cheese rather than when it's stacked on top of each other, it might look like it's all in one. So that can be kind of tough. But I think this is a great way. And you can also like lean it a little bit. One of the easy ways to lay out a manchego. Or you can take these, and this is what I personally like to do. I like to fan out the cheese to really kind of create some texture and a different dynamic on the board. I'm really big with textures. I'll probably say it 300 times tonight because I think it's just such an important part of keeping things like exciting on your board. Trust me, these are words I never thought were going to come out of my mouth when I said keeping cheese exciting or like this cheese is beautiful and any of those terms. So you can laugh along too, because it's still sometimes weird saying it. But I love the different textures and style that kind of create with these cheeses. This is one way to do it. And this I think is just a fun way to let fan down the side. You can also create like a river type thing and let it like lean on each other and go through the center of your plate and kind of alternating like that. Really, it's up to your preference of what you prefer. So I encourage you to kind of play around with the style that you like the most or that you think works for you or works for your board. You can also cut these in half. So right now they're this size, but you could always cut these in half to make it a little bit smaller, and you can make your cheese go a little bit further and you can create that same style look there. And it's just a little bit thinner. So you have a few different options to pick from. And I think it's a fun way to spice it up on your board a little bit. I'm going to just like angle this one and make it a little bit like off the side and then fan it out like that. Feel free to pick which one you like the best. And then I have this wonderful Toscana soaked cheese that is from Trader Joe's. It's amazing. It's soaked in Syrah. It's so good. And again, this is in a triangle shape, but it's a little bit more of like a progression. So it's a little bit more tough to kind of cut this way, but I like to lay it out on my board and then create little triangles. So I'm just gonna alternate the direction of my knife as I'm going back and forth here and create these little triangles that are really easy for people to grab. And kind of like see the difference of where the cheese ends. So again, this is a hard cheese, so it's not something you kind of want to just like throw on the board and then expect people to like awkwardly break it or just maybe take the whole thing, which is totally cool too if that's what they want. But this is a fun, like different way to arrange your cheese and lay it out. Sometimes I will not go the full way and just kind of like give people that guidance that they need to continue to cut the cheese that way. But so that's a great way to do it too. This cheese I made a little bit smaller just because I'm not going to put the whole brick on my cheese board. But honestly, I would probably put the whole brick and eat the whole thing if I was going to. So once you've got that, you can kind of grab it, and it's okay if it breaks. I think it is a little bit better when it's a little bit broken and mishmashed a bit. And it's just giving people the visibility there that they can see they can grab different pieces, and creates that kind of like fun, different dynamic that's happening on your board. Another thing, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. What is the name of that cheese that you just placed on your board again?
It's a Toscana and it's a Syrah soaked, and they have this, let's see, let me show you the back end piece of it.
Oh, thank you.
It is soaked in wine. So the rind is totally edible. You can eat that. And it's just kind of the way the cheese has been soaked. It's delicious. Yes. And if you are at Trader Joe's, they also have, I believe it's a, they do like different seasonal ones. So sometimes I think I've seen like a coffee, like soaked cheese that's amazing as well. But this one's my favorite. And I really love the purple that is on the end of the cheese. I think it just is a fun little color pop throughout it. Excuse me. Next, I have just a cheddar cheese. I tried to do a few more hard cheeses to show you guys a few different ways to cut your cheese. So you have a little bit more ideas and you have different ways to show the different types of cheeses. So I'm going to create some like matchstick looking cheese blocks with this. And that's just super simple by cutting down and creating just these extra pieces of cheese and then cutting them into little slices. And again, I think this makes it super easy for people to grab. They can pick and choose what they want, but it's just a cute, fun way. You can stack that or you can fan it out too, really up to your preference. But I wanted to just show you a few different styles of a few different ways to cut your cheese so that you can kind of like pick and choose what works best for you and the board you have. So if you have like a longer board, you could maybe create like a line of these down the side if you wanted to, or just kind of like switching it up a little bit just to make it look a little bit different. But let me finish those. Just gonna throw a few on there. I'm gonna save some of this cheese. The recommended amount of cheese and meat per person, they say, as the internet says, about 2 ounces per person. I know for a fact that when I've weighed that out, I eat way more than 2 ounces, but that is what they recommend. And if you're going to like a large group and you want to build a board that you think is going to feed enough people, that's a good thing to kind of gauge how much cheese you want to buy. And you can look at when a cheese is packaged, they'll say how much the ounces on it or the weight, so you can figure out what you'll need. And it's a good way to kind of gauge that. I tend to overfill my boards. I love the overflowed look. So I definitely go towards like 4 or 5 ounces a person, but that's just me. It's up to your preference. And I know that I usually don't have a lot of leftover cheese, but when I do, a great way to use your leftover cheese, and someone I did a class for recently recommend putting it in mac and cheese, which I think is amazing. It doesn't last super long in the refrigerator after you've had it cut. So I think that's a great idea. Also, a grilled cheese is an awesome way to use up some old cheese. Not old, just cheese you don't eat, and you can throw it on with like an apple and toast up, and it's wonderful. Someone asked, how should I place a goat cheese? So the log of goat cheese, I would recommend just putting the log on there and then always serving it with some sort of knife or something else on there. I actually, if you look on my Instagram recently, shared a tutorial about adding edible flowers to a goat cheese log and lining those around the goat cheese, and then pressing it on with saran wrap. And then I like to top it with Mike's hot honey. It's so good. And it really is beautiful, and it's a great addition to your board. If you are growing edible or growing flowers at home, you can use your own flowers, but I also get my flowers from a company called Gourmet Sweet Botanicals. They're based in California, and they will overnight them to you. My little flowers are looking a little sad here because they're a couple days old now, but they last a good time in the refrigerator. And it's a great addition to your goat cheese log, and it adds a little bit of pizzazz. You can also slice your goat cheese too. I would recommend one of my tools, this wire cutter to cut your goat cheese log. You can get this on Amazon. I have an Amazon shop that I can send, or you can message me and I can send you the link to, and it has this on it, and it makes it super easy. And you literally just like slice down on the goat cheese. When you use a knife, I feel like the knife pulls and kind of like drags everything around and just gets messy and gross. One alternative to using this is also you can just grab some floss and use floss to slice the goat cheese too. I've used that trick a few times, and it's pretty easy, and you get the same result as using one of these wire cutters. So same, but easier. Usually, hopefully everyone has floss, so you have that to use at home. So now that you've got your cheese, this again is really the foundation, and everything is going to be built around your cheese, because I think cheese is the most important part of your board. So from here, I like to add my ramekin. So if that's a jam or a honey, I personally am obsessed with all fig jam. There is a fig jam that has like fig and orange. That's amazing. It's wonderful. I think it pairs well with almost every cheese. It's not too sweet, but it's the perfect amount that kind of like cuts any sort of tang that a cheese might have. Like if you have a cheese like Humboldt Fog, it's a little bit more bitter. It has an edible ash rind down the middle, so it's a little bit more earthy flavored. And I think a jam is the perfect pairing, and like a blackberry really cuts that kind of like earthy texture. Honey is also a great addition to boards. I love to serve it with a cute little honey scooper. The word just totally went away from me, but that's a great way. And people love to dip it and drizzle their honey over whatever they put together. So please feel free to put whatever you have. I like to use this little like mason jar. You can certainly put the entire container of jam onto your plate, or a little bowl if you have anything that's easily accessible for that. And then from here, I like to add in my meat. So I'm going to show you guys a few different ways to style the meat that you have. And I have just a regular salami. This is Columbus Craft Meats, and I got this from Trader Joe's. Really delicious and a very mild salami. And I'm sure you guys have all seen that the salami rose, there was like that TikTok trend where people were like folding it over the champagne glass. I have not tried that, but I'm going to show you a way that you can make a salami rose at home. It's very simple. So if you just take a few slices of your salami and layer them on top of one another, hopefully you guys can see that okay. And you're going to probably do like 5 or 6 pieces. You can certainly do more if you want your rows to be a little bit bigger, and just start to like kind of like stagger them just a little bit apart from one another. And then from there, also your hands are going to get a little bit greasy. So just as a warning, you're going to probably wash your hands after. And of course, whenever I'm doing this for anyone else, I'm always wearing gloves, but you guys get the idea. So you are going to fold over your salami so that you've got this just little kind of like folded piece here. And then on one side, start to tuck kind of tightly, spinning. I'll show you guys as I keep going if my arm's kind of in the way. Tuck and twist. And you're going to just start to kind of like create this funnel as you go. And you'll see that you continue to twist, you start to get a flower. And I'll show it this way too, so you guys can really see. You're just twisting and dropping. And then you have this little salami rose. And as you put it on your plate, you can open it up a little bit more to make it a little bit more open, and maybe have a garden rose on your board. You can also throw in a toothpick at the bottom if you want, just to hold it together a little bit. As a fair warning though, when you toothpick it, people tend to grab the entire thing. So just know that they will probably take the whole rose. So if you want that, feel free to do it. But I actually really like the kind of open look that it creates on my boards when I don't have it. So I'm just going to kind of tuck that in here and open up a few of those. And if it starts to untuck, you can always just like tuck it into another piece of cheese. If it's kind of like coming too undone, just depends how it goes. But that's one way you can certainly do that. And another way, I tend to do this the most on my boards is I just take the piece of salami and I fold it in half once and then fold it in half again. And you get this little ribbon of little salami there. And then I start to group a bunch of those together. So I have those and I'm just going to continue to layer it. You can start to alternate so you can see like where you folded it on one side and folded on the other, just alternating a bit. And you start to get these really pretty kind of folds that create like a little layer throughout your board. And then I just find pockets where I'd like to tuck them into. So over here, I'll just lean up against the two and just kind of tuck it. And then when I'm doing this, I look to see where there's open space. So obviously there's a lot of open space on this side that doesn't have meat because I just put them on that side. So I like to make sure I do a balance throughout the board. So it's just really grouping people. If someone is on one side of the table and they want something on the other side, this is giving them the opportunity to get a piece of that little meat that's tucked away and they're still able to get what they want. So I'm just going to continue to do that and tuck those into little spots. Feel free to try out the salami rose bigger if you want or smaller. I did a Bridgerton themed board and made a bunch of little salami roses, and I just thought they were like the cutest little addition to add through. It just adds a little, just different fun area and way for people to kind of like look throughout the board. So I've got this. I'm just going to kind of slide those in there and just pop it in. And then next I'm going to use prosciutto, I'm sorry. And prosciutto, I feel like can sometimes be a pain. It can be challenging sometimes because it just, you know, has its mind of its own. So I always recommend keeping your prosciutto in the refrigerator and taking it out or putting it in the freezer for a little bit of time right before you're going to use it. It tends to work with you a little bit more. But when you get prosciutto, it usually is always separated by these little plastic sheets. I recommend pulling the plastic sheet away from the prosciutto versus the prosciutto away from the plastic sheet. You tend to keep your prosciutto more in one piece. You'll lose like a couple little ends on there, but it's totally fine. If you try the other way, it tends to just kind of get stuck everywhere. So I like to also create little like bundles or roses with my prosciutto as well. And I start by doing that. And I'm going to do this a few times so you guys can see because it's kind of just rolling and tucking just like the salami rose. So you start to just take the bottom and twisting and kind of tucking that in there. And I leave this like little fatty white side up because I like the color that it brings to the board. And I just kind of start to fold and really just tuck that in there. And then you have this little prosciutto rose, prosciutto flower, lots of different types of flowers that you can create with your meat on the board. So I'm just going to tuck that in here, add it into where my other little salami rose is. You know what? I'm actually going to take this salami rose out because I'm going to add more of my prosciutto roses around it so that it's all the same. And that's one thing too. So while you're making your board, if you don't like where something is, it's not in like cement, so you can totally move it. So if you don't like where it looks or what it looks like when it's in that certain spot, change it. And also like, this is all like just an art. So whatever you end up creating is beautiful and you should be proud of yourself no matter what it turns out and what it looks like.
What about eating as you go, Laura? How much?
That is totally allowed, totally acceptable. I encourage it. I'll be surprised if anyone has a full plate when they're done. I will, because I'm not going to chew in front of you guys just to spare you all. Another way, sometimes I've seen a lot of people do ribbons, and that is just like folding the prosciutto, like just like kind of back and forth, and that creates a ribbon look like this. I think the prosciutto sometimes just doesn't like to work with me when I do that. So I like to stick with that twist. Again, that's just that tucking from the bottom, twisting around, and you start to kind of just get this natural clump, not the right word, cluster of the prosciutto, and it folds kind of how it is naturally supposed to fold. So I'm just going to tuck another one there, and I'm going to do one more because I like to do like 2s and 3s of things that are bigger like this, so that just kind of balances it out a little bit. So again, I just tried to peel the prosciutto off my paper and almost lost half my prosciutto. So peeling from the back, and it is so much easier when it does that. And then you can just tuck and twist. Does anyone have a preference in their style of the salami flour or prosciutto? Do you like the prosciutto or the salami flours more? And has anyone tried the TikTok trend? I haven't, but I know that that went wild. If you want to write it in the chat, you can. All right. Okay. So now that you have your meats, a very important part of the board is the vessel to get the cheese and meat into your mouth. And I always have an extra side of crackers because there's never enough on the board. It never fits. If you want to have like a side of like a baguette on the side, that's a great alternative as well. But one of my all-time favorite crackers are these Fig and Olive Crisp from Trader Joe's. They're so good, and I think they just create the perfect crunch. I also love just a regular water cracker, like a Cars cracker is great. It really kind of balances out the flavor so that you're not really being like taken over by the cracker. Firehook is another amazing brand that I really love. Their crackers are wonderful. But so for the purposes of this little board, I'm going to just grab a few pieces of these crackers and try to make sure I get whole ones. And then start to just kind of like fan them out. So my board's a little bit angled, so it might not stay the way I want it to. So you know what I'm going to do instead? Actually, I'm going to fan them along the outside of my ramekin because that'll hold it up. So it creates this little kind of easy thing that it pushed up against, and you can easily grab it because it's on the end. And I'm going to try to also do that. Maybe I'll just do a line of them. So you can kind of play around with what works best for your board or what stays up best on your board. I think that sometimes it's totally different. One thing though, if you are going to put your board in the refrigerator, I recommend not putting crackers on your board because they will probably get a little mushy, and so just keep them on the side. If you're looking for ways to fill up your board without having to spend more on other ingredients, crackers are a great way to do that. You can add more crackers just to kind of fill it up a little bit. So I'm just going to do this, but reminder, always put a vessel of crackers on the side so that you can have more for people to pick from. And I feel like the ones on the board always go so quickly, and then people kind of are like, what now? So now you have a whole side of them as well. Okay, so we've got kind of like our core ingredients here, and it's kind of bland looking. So now is when we want to start to add some color. So I had just mentioned that a good way to fill up a board and keeping it cost effective is adding crackers. Grapes are also a great way to do that. It takes up a lot of space and you're able to kind of really fill in, adds a pop of color, and it's a really great pairing with any of your cheeses and meats. And I got some red grapes. I'm not sure if you guys have seen or heard, but there's like a shortage of green grapes everywhere in like the charcuterie world. No one is able really to find green grapes. So if you found green grapes, you are basically, it's like a 4-leaf clover right now. So I'm going to use these as like a bigger anchor. So when I start to add my fruits, I like to use the bigger items that I have first because it just really kind of sets that like key core ingredients, and then I can build around those things. So I've got that little bundle of grapes, but because that one's kind of big, I'm going to go with a smaller little group of grapes. And I just like to use a scissors and just kind of trim those a little bit, and then just tuck it in a little spot back here. If you don't have like a full bushel, like if it's not, doesn't look like a goddess is dropping grapes into your mouth, you can always kind of go to the bottom of these and grab little bushels or just like 1 or 2 and then place them on top and fill it in. And it looks like it is this perfect bundle of grapes. And then actually when people go grab it, they have the whole thing that they can easily grab, and it makes it super easy. But that's a trick that I like to do if I get like a crummy box of grapes and I really need it to make look full and beautiful. I'll cut little pieces and layer them on top of one another. And then depending on the color of grapes, sometimes I'll like throw blackberries on my grapes because I think it also makes it look fuller. But so grapes, that's kind of like the core here. If you have those, to set those down. Again, a great way to take up more space on your board if you want to be cost effective. Another thing I'm going to show you guys. So I have a kiwi here. I love to add, again, dimensions to any way possible. So when I cut my kiwi, I like to do this zigzag kind of edge around it. This can work with an orange, tangerine, anything that you have that you want to kind of just display. I don't really expect people to eat it, but I also am not surprised at all when people pick it up and do take it. But this is more for adding some different pops of color and a little bit of texture and layer throughout my board. So to do this, I'm just going to start alternating my knife in zigzag directions and going kind of about halfway through the kiwi, and just alternating those through all the way around until they meet the other side. And when you open it up, you get this beautiful view, which I will show you. But again, just alternating your knife back and forth. And you kind of have to go kind of further than you would expect when you're doing this, because you need to actually like make sure that when you pull it apart, it's actually going to separate. So do it more on like an angled position, so it's down into the kiwi. And as you do that, you'll see when we pull this apart in 2 seconds, maybe 4 seconds.
It's very impressive that you can do this and talk at the same time.
No, had a lot of practice. I had to do about like 25 of these a couple of weeks ago. So I feel like
my gosh,
I've gotten it down.
You can do it in your sleep.
And it's like kind of weird, but you're fine. And then you can just pull it apart and you get this like it's like kind of looks like a flower, like a little lotus. And you have this pop of green that I just love to add to my boards. I think it's a great way to kind of, again, set like these textures and layers and building out the different things that you see. Sorry, I still have some salami grease on my fingers, so I'm going to wipe them off. You don't have to put both sides, but I'm going to just chuck this other one on this side. I love to like overfill my boards, like I had said in the beginning. I just think it's so much more beautiful to look at, and people are so much more enticed when they can't see the bottom of the board. And that's just the style I like to do. You don't have to do that. But when you take a look at my Instagram, you'll see that most of my boards are very full and overflowing. So we've got these kind of like bigger of our fruits laid down. And now we're going to start to add in some more fruits that I really love to pair. Blackberries are one of my favorite things to pair with a cheese, especially like a triple cream brie. This St. Andre triple cream is just like the creamiest, delicious heaven. And it just goes so well with a blackberry because it's not too sweet and really just creates the perfect texture. And I encourage you guys to try out different things. So when you are at the grocery store, check out some dried apricots, or maybe there are some different types of fruits that you haven't had before. And then when you arrange your board, try different things together. I like to put things near each other that I know they're going to taste well, like that fig jam and the St. Andre, like I had said. And I like to kind of like group those together. So once you've tried some things out, and just see what your palate, like what you enjoy the most, because it's going to be different for everyone. With the Midnight Moon Cypress Grove cheese I was saying before, I absolutely love pairing that with an apricot. It's a super nutty, buttery cheese. So the apricot is just like the perfect kind of addition there. And sometimes I'll even drizzle some honey on top of that too, because why not? So now as I'm doing my blackberries, I'm just going to start to create little like clusters throughout the board. So again, I'm looking at my board and seeing where there is maybe not some color, or I want to make sure it's filled in a little bit more, and just kind of like evenly balancing it. When I'm building my boards at home, I don't really plan out much before. I have an idea in mind, like if I want to focus on a certain color, I'll really go get different ingredients that have certain colors, and then just kind of look at my board and see where I think it should be filled in. So as you're doing this, look over your board. You can kind of really look over and see. And I always do this at the end too, because I really am into adding another layer. If there's another something that you can add to the board, I love to add it in there. So this little spot over here, I'm actually going to save it. So it's open, kind of bothering me, but I'm going to wait because I'm going to put some raspberries in it eventually. But one other thing I really like to do on my boards, again, to create that texture and really get people looking at different things, is layering colors on top of one another of different fruits. So I've got these blueberries. I'm actually going to put the blueberries right on top of the blackberries because I think it is just a nice little dimension that it adds. And it gives people just a different option to pick from as they're grabbing from their cheeses. You can also do this if you have like, when I do raspberries, if you have pomegranate seeds, that's a really great fun thing to sprinkle on top of it. And you can also do the opposite. So if you have blackberries and you wanted to drizzle pomegranate seeds over it too, it just creates a different look and giving people something different to look at. And it's just really creates that color pop and different textures going on there. See, I told you I would say textures like 300 times, and I've already probably hit that number. So next I'm going to add in raspberries. I really love the color that raspberries add to the board, and I do think it pairs really nicely with most cheeses. So I'm just going to start to again look at where there are some openings, maybe drop just a couple in that little corner, add a few in this middle spot so we're open in here still. But I still also am going to be adding nuts and some dried fruit. So I don't have to go overboard here until there's like absolutely no space, but I'm going to fill in again, kind of like looking for the balance. I can't stand up and look around, so I'm going to twist my thing. Okay, I just kind of like looking around, seeing what might make sense to add more into a certain spot. I'm going to add some more up here. I also like to try to avoid, like if I have green grapes on my board, or if I am putting, I'm trying to think of something, but essentially I don't want people to get confused with one another. So if someone goes and grabs what they think is a green grape and it's an olive and it has a seed in it, it could be, yes, disastrous. So I like to either make sure that those are very separated from one another. And if I'm doing olives, sometimes putting them in their own ramekin on the side or on the plate, so people know, or making sure that they're very far apart from one another so that people aren't confused by that. I also recommend if you're doing olives on your board that you should get ones that don't have the pits for the sake of people just grabbing them and chopping on them. But I personally think olives taste best when there's a pit. So it's up to you, but just make sure to warn your guests if there is a pit on in your olives. So next I'm going to add some dried apricots. You can do any sort of dried fruit. I just love to add apricots. I also think it's a great alternative to a cracker. So if you have someone that might be gluten-free, this could be a great option for them to grab a piece of cheese and put it directly onto the apricot. It's a little bit more of a mild flavor, so it's not going to be super overpowering, and I still get to really enjoy the cheese. So I'm just going to grab a few of those in here. You can layer them on top of another. You can fan them out and kind of tuck them in here. So I'm going to just add them into that little propped up on the ramekin, and just tuck them where they kind of fall. Sometimes if I see open spots, so like I know there's an open spot over there, I'm just going to put two of them and kind of fan them out a little bit and just layer them in there and then tucking it away. And if there are a little spot, so I've done orange in two spots. So looking at my board, I'm going to add some orange on this other side because I don't like it when it's not completely balanced. I don't not like it. I just prefer it when it's balanced like that. But you can also just put them in different clusters. So if you want to have all of your apricots in one section, that totally works too. It's basically, you are going to be taking the picture and enjoying and eating it after. So do what you are going to be enjoying the most. I do think that when you're at a party and you have a bigger board, adding this variety around the board gives people the opportunity to be able to grab things that if you had it all on one side, they might have to like awkwardly move around over there, or it just could create kind of a, I don't know, weird, you could just do whatever you please, but I like to do it just giving people the opportunity to move around a little bit. Next, I like to add a crunch. So that is some sort of nut usually, and I am obsessed. Trader Joe's again has the Marcona almonds. I'm sure if you guys have been to Trader Joe's, you know they have a rosemary and it is amazing. And they also have a truffle. And I feel like whenever I use the truffle, people think like, oh my God, you're so fancy. And I'm like, yes, I know the truffle, it's wonderful. And they also like go in my mouth by the handfuls because they're so good. So highly recommend those. I also love doing a candied walnut. That is an awesome addition. And I love to do a candied walnut with basically any kind of like nutty cheese, the manchego, it's delicious with. And honestly, I love them so much. I think they're great with everything. Same with the fig jam. Those are like two of my favorites that I will usually always put on my board, and apricots I usually always put on my board as well. So when I'm adding in the nuts, I'm looking in here at these last little holes because like we're pretty full here. This is like almost done. So I'm going to start to just kind of drizzle in a few places and letting them just kind of fall organically as they like kind of put them in there. If one of them gets tucked in the salami, that's totally fine. Like it's not a big deal. I like when it looks very overflown and natural and layered and textured. There's a couple empty holes over here. I'm going to continue to add those in, and just really looking around the board, finding areas where here's any last holes. I think that there's a hole over here, but I can't really see. And then you pretty much have your board completely full at this part. So now that you've really got this done, you can kind of like look through, look around, see if there are any last holes you could add in different things. So like maybe like untucking that flower that you have, making it look a little bit more full, fanning out your cheese if maybe it's moved a little bit when you've been building out your board, or leave it as is, whatever you prefer. But I think this looks pretty full, and I think we're got a pretty good foundation. So now one of my favorite ways to kind of like elevate my boards, and great way for people to kind of like be very impressed, is adding a garnish. So I like to use rosemary or sage are my go-to. Sage, I think, is a really nice, like natural, like kind of organic look on a board. So sometimes they can be a little bit fussy, but usually if you get it from like Trader Joe's has it for very cheap. And you can just see that they've got this kind of like just groups here, and I will break that off. And I love to use these and lay them around my ramekins and just creating this little like texture around here and letting that just organically kind of fall over one another. I'll lift this up a little bit more too so you guys can see, but just starting to fan those around that. And then looking for other spots where I want to add some greenery and texture to the board. So I like to sometimes use these like little ones. I think they're little cutie little twigs here, and just kind of like adding them, maybe like putting them behind my kiwi to make it look like the kiwi is what actually is like made that greenery. And then other times too, I like to take these actual leaves. So I'll break them off and then I layer them on top of one another. So it really looks like an actual like leaf, like you're getting something like that. And I like to tuck them behind a cheese or in a corner so that it kind of overflows from the board. My sage is a little sad. It was out of the refrigerator for a little long, but it'll perk up a little bit more if you have it freshly out of the refrigerator. And then just looking throughout your board, adding any last spots where there should be some greenery. I think I'm going to tuck a little in here. If you have rosemary and sage, I really like to layer them on top of one another and really, again, creating that texture that's really kind of different. And people start to look at different things, and they're really looking at what's going on your board, and it really gets them excited about what's happening. And I think that sometimes the herbs on here can be a little limiting, and people feel hesitant to dive in. So sometimes if I'm like at a party, I will remove the garnish so that people feel like they're not totally disrupting the board. And feel like they can jump right in. So I'm just going to add that there. I also have some edible flowers I'm going to add, but they're looking really sad right now. So maybe I'll just put one of those on there, and I'll plop it onto my sage to make it look like a little bit more lively. Maybe one more, because I like to create the balance throughout my board. But if you guys have any questions or anything in particular about when you're building your boards, please feel free to message me. I see that they added burying the boards to the chat. I would love to see the boards that you've created or what you create down the road. I love seeing everyone's work. If you are a private profile, just know if you tag me, I won't be able to see you. So feel free to message it to me, or if you're public, I will be able to see it. But I would love to see the boards that you guys create. And we've got your plate now. How did it all turn out? Hopefully good. Good.
I love that you have so many colors on yours, Laura. I think I need more color next time, but I'm pretty impressed. I didn't think I was going to be successful, but your tips did make it really easy.
Good. I'm glad to hear. I feel like greenery is always a good color pop. So if you don't have a ton of color, just add like a rosemary or something. And that's a great way to add a little bit more pizzazz. These little flowers look really sad. I'm gonna check them off. I see someone saying any recommendation on drinks to pair with the goodies. Ooh, I mean, you can never go wrong with a glass of wine, red or white. I think it depends on the time of day when you're enjoying your board. If I were going to go sit outside and enjoy this al fresco, I would definitely have a glass of rosé or like a Sauvignon Blanc. Those are just my personal preferences, but I highly suggest wine. I feel like wine always pairs very well with cheese. I will say though, gin pairs very well with a hard goat cheese. I've done a bunch of different research and kind of like looked at different types of cheeses that pair well. And I have found that gin and I think goat cheese pair very nicely together. Can you talk about what edible flowers? Yes. So my favorite edible flowers are pansies and violas. So Gourmet Sweet Botanicals has a ton of different kinds. Please obviously take a look and see what you have. I will say shipping is a little pricey. So if you have something like an occasion that you want to get them for, it's definitely worth it. And you should get a little bit more than what you're planning for because it's a little bit expensive. But I just think, so pansies, just to clarify too, pansies are very big. So what I had here, they're totally like have melted on me. They didn't do very well in the heat when they got shipped to me. These are violas, so they're smaller. And this is the style I prefer, but some people like to put the big ones on their boards too, and that's really great. I just think these are able to layer on top of one another, and I like to put 2 flowers together sometimes, and really creates a nice texture. I also really love to use chamomile flowers. Those are really beautiful. Those are the little daisy looking ones. I think that those are so cute and perfect for summer. If you're not accessible to edible flowers, you can certainly get flowers from the grocery store. I would just not recommend putting the ends of the flowers into anything. They use different pesticides and different types of things that could potentially get onto your board. And you don't want someone to maybe get sick from that. And I would definitely avoid baby's breath. That's like one of the most toxic types of flowers that it could just totally like contaminate your board. But you can totally like tuck a rose in there. I mean, if you think about like, if you're at a wedding and someone has flowers on their cake, they're probably not edible flowers. You're just not directly eating it, or they're not directly tucked into your what you're going to be enjoying. Oh, great tip from someone that you can grow. Yes, you can totally grow flowers. What else what was someone saying here? Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions or anything that I can help with, or anything in general?
Laura, tell us a little bit about how you got started in doing this.
Sure. Yeah. So it's been about 2 years now since I started my actual business, but I was very much, my family has always been entertainers. I love to host people, and growing up, I always like, Laura, you handle appetizers, or you figure out something. And even at a young age, it was kind of like, okay, like, what am I going to do? And I feel like when it first really started was when Pinterest became like really big, and you got to like find different ideas. And then I just started creating boards, and then people started asking to make them, and it just kind of evolved into a business. And COVID has really kind of changed kind of like the landscape of this industry in general, and done more virtual classes, or a lot of like smaller boxes, and brands are looking to activate differently and try to get the attention from someone if they're sending them to an influencer or an editor. So it's that kind of has been like the pivot that I've really kind of leaned into throughout this pandemic. And hosting classes like this for everyone is always fun. And I've been doing that for a lot of businesses too, that are looking to add a little spice. So if you have a company that you think would enjoy doing a charcuterie class with your employees, you let me know. I'd love to host a class for you guys.
I don't know. We've got some professionals now here too. These pictures.
They might be able to have the class, the host it themselves.
Keep sending the pictures. They're awesome. Those of you who are putting them in the chat or putting them on social media, you can send them to us too, and we'll make sure Laura sees them. There was one other question too. Are there rules, so to speak, for afternoon versus evening events?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't really think so. I would say more seasonal. So if I really try to like leverage the fruit that's in season, and really like leaning into that. So stone fruit is starting to become super ripe right now. We're about to get peaches, and I like cannot wait to grill some peaches. So that's something I'd probably do more during the day, just because the grill is on. But I don't think that there are any rules for that, or I don't follow any rules for that. And I think it's based on what you guys enjoy and what you want to do, but totally up to you. I tend to be more seasonal. Oh, Essie's showing us her board. It looks beautiful. I need to put it on gallery view so I can see everyone's board.
Oh yeah, you can default to gallery view.
The people that are showing.
Oh, I love these. Yeah. Deb Lang, that looks beautiful.
We made 3. So there's 3 of us here, and we made 3 boards.
Awesome.
So, yeah, super
so
fun.
Beautiful.
Ooh, margarita.
Oh my God, everyone's so good. I love that you guys kind of picked and chose what you wanted to do, especially with like the manchego and being able to do the zipper if you like that style, or changing it up that way.
You look great. please send your photos to us at alumni@bentley.edu.
Yes.
We love them.
And
They look
tag
great.
Gary in the boards.
Yeah, be sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. There was one other question I was going to ask. Oh, I know. I was going to ask you too. And somebody else asked, what's your favorite type or taste or theme of board to make yourself?
Ooh, I've been really loving making fruit boards right now. I think that it's just so fun to play with the different colors. If you look at my Instagram, I've done a few different types. The last one I did a little bit more of like a green and like purple theme and trying out some different colors that way. And I did a tropical board. That's been really fun. People also really love any sort of theme that's kind of like the holiday that's coming up. So Memorial Day is right around the corner. I need to get on my content and put together some red, white, and blue boards. I shared a board actually recently that I did last year, and I think it's very different than my current style, which I think is interesting to see kind of like over time, the progression there. But if you look back at different holidays, like Valentine's Day, I did a ton of red ones with lots of like pinks and purples and reds. And during the holidays, I did a Christmas tree that performed very well. Everyone really loved that one. So themes around the holidays are also very fun to make as well. And they're challenging. They kind of force me to like think outside the box and try something different that I wouldn't normally do on like a regular cheese plate. So it's fun. Oh, recommendation on which cheeses to bake. Brie, always. I love baked brie. Someone recently told me this recipe and I have not done it yet, but it's going to be the next thing I do. They took a brie and you pack the top with brown sugar, like a lot of brown sugar, and you bake it. But on the side, you have like a bulb of garlic that you've cut and you roast the garlic. And so then once your brie is done, you use a bread or like a ciabatta, put a little scoop of garlic on your ciabatta and then the brie with the brown sugar. And that to me is like that salty and sweet deliciousness. And I cannot wait to try. But really, you can't go wrong with like any sort of baked brie. I also like a halloumi brie. I like to grill. That's also really good. And I'm sure everyone has seen like the feta, baked feta is like a super fun trend too. Instead of mixing it with like tomatoes and pasta, I like to bake it and then drizzle it with honey and salt and pepper. And then you can use that to scoop with like a pita. And that is delicious as well. Tips and rules for using toothpicks or forks and knives that are placed on the board. Question? Okay, tips for using things like toothpicks. Okay, if you are going to use a toothpick, I just think it's really important for people to know not to like dip their toothpick back in unless it's like a group or family gathering. So I tend to avoid toothpicks for that reason, but knives, I like to always put near a cheese and kind of pick and choosing knives based on what it is. So for the St. Andre, I'm going to use a knife that has a flat edge that's easier for people to scoop and grab versus if I had made little squares with this, I might use the ones that kind of like have the tongs that you can grab and a little bit easier for people to pull. But I really kind of base your own preference. If you do have like, sometimes I like to do like a mozzarella ball and a tomato on a toothpick and then people can grab and pull that away. That really kind of encourages that behavior where they're not going to come back and jab it into cheese that's available there. So that's how I do it. I just like to be careful too. If someone doesn't necessarily see that there's a toothpick, I don't really know how you couldn't, and just put it into your mouth and ate the whole thing. That could be a little bit dangerous, but it's kind of based on your own preference. And usually if you buy like a cheese knife kit or like Target has some great ones, you can always find one from Trader Joe's. There's usually, I'm sorry, not Trader Joe's, TJ Maxx, my second home. They usually have great ones and there are 3 usually in there. And that is usually like the perfect knives that you need to kind of like have with all the different types of things that you have on your board. Yeah. Any other questions?
I don't think it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So again, please ask Alora to do your company outing because what wouldn't be better or provide charcuterie boards, especially now that we're all going to start gathering again, you know, in the nearish future.
Yeah, so now you can wow everyone with your skills.
Exactly. Thank you so much. We so appreciate you giving back to the community by sharing your skills and your tips and your tricks with all of us. And I'm sure everyone's hungry, and if they haven't started devouring already after you got your picture, everyone can go off and do that now. So thank you, Alora. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you guys so much. I look forward to seeing your boards, and please go enjoy with a glass of wine or whatever your drink of choice is.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, everyone, have a great night. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.